when I think of a satellite, I think of like $100 million in this giant thing that's on a giant NASA rocket that goes up, and now apparently there are these tiny satellites, and they're like the size of a Rubik's cube or smaller, even like 1/8 the volume of a Rubik's cube, so half along the X, Y, and Z dimensions, and they're called various things like CubeSats, TubeSats, pocket cubes, and the cost of buying one, maybe already mostly already configured, and launching it is dropping to the point where there are a lot of high schools, even elementary schools, believe it or not, are designing satellites, and in order to learn, the education, learn about rocket engineering and aerospace and so forth. And so I said, well, okay, gee, I wonder if people in alt space could like design a satellite, and get it into orbit. And so I started looking. I even got quotes over here underneath this big logo over here. I found the cheapest company that I could find, and they are so for a CubeSat, their quote is. So I was thinking, well, gee, a makerspace. So I have a makerspace that's in my bedroom. It's like 3D printers and Arduino and a CNC mill and things like that. And I was talking, and I when I was Googling around, I saw that there were like clubs that were getting together, in like ham radio clubs, because ham radio is relevant to communicating with the satellite, are getting together and building these satellites. And now, traditionally, they've been around for over 20 years. These tiny, in fact, the Small Satellite Conference is 34 years old. But about 20 years ago, a guy at Caltech and a guy at Stanford came up with a standard specification for the size and weight and attachment points for these things called CubeSats. So, in fact, I'm pointing in that general direction. That's a giant CubeSat, but imagine that over there is actually 4 inches by 4 inches by 4 inches. Okay, and that's what it kind of looks like. And about over 1,000 have been launched, and there's about 1,000 in the pipeline. And the way in which these little kit satellites get into space traditionally is there's extra room in the corner of a rocket. Let's say NASA has. Now, of course, Europe has rockets, and India and China. Yeah, cool. And so, they basically, there's like a little bit of leftover, and stick it in there, and it goes up to whatever its altitude is, and then it just kind of pushes them out. And they've even had one where a cosmonaut launched a Portuguese satellite on a spacewalk. He just went out, he's floating around tethered, and he reaches in his bag and he pulls out a little cube satellite from Portugal, and he just kind of throws it off in that direction, and that's the way it was launched. And so I'm going to talk a little bit about the technology, and then I'm going to ask, well, what might alt space do with a satellite? Okay, because it sounds kind of ridiculous on the face of it, but I've had conversations here with several people where at the end of the conversation they went, wow, this is like, you got me intrigued, So anyway, these little satellites, okay, have got solar panels to keep them powered, okay, and a battery that's charged by the solar panels. They have a transceiver, something that basically it's a radio transceiver that can send and receive data, okay, and when they fly overhead, they are momentarily able to upload or download data, and they do that from a ground station. Okay. Now, historically, that's been like a ham radio operator with like a complicated box and an antenna, and it's overhead for 5 minutes, and but over here, Altspace, Amazon Web Services, they basically have a bunch of hardware all around the world. The actual hardware ground stations, and you can use theirs for a small amount of money. Okay, so based on how much data and so forth. So over there in the distance, I actually have a kind of a fake ground station. I'm not going to drag you over there, but you can see that it's got like a map of the world, and it's got a little line on there that indicates like where the satellite is at the time. And so I'm going. Now I'm thinking, wow. Well, what you could do is could create an interactable. So if anybody's noticed that there's people are programming and creating applications in AltSpace, and you throw the basketball through the hoop and things like that. But also there's a bunch of programmers that are, and it's like on version like 0.18, which is very early versions. The documentation isn't very good, but you could imagine creating an interactable that is a virtual ground station. Okay, that has a live map that shows you where the tells you when it's overhead, and depending on where you are in the world, and shows the satellite moving there, and you could just spawn it into your space. Anybody in AltSpace could say, hey, if you're having like a space themed or anything with like geoplanetary science, there's a lot of interesting science geeky meetups, and you could have one of those. And so now I'm going to say I'm almost here, ready to open it up to conversation for ideas and suggestions, and throwing stuff against the wall to see what sticks. So I kind of, the hardware, designing custom hardware is hard. Okay, and that these universities like Caltech, they have like a clean room, and they build it, and they learn a lot. And plus it's physical, so we can't all get together to do that. Okay, so that's kind of a problem. Okay, but let's assume. Okay, let's just assume somehow that we could actually design the hardware, and maybe someone else would design it for us. Okay, maybe. Okay, what might so like at the top. So if you're actually going to do custom, that's expensive. Okay, it's probably way more expensive than we'd want to do. You couldn't do a Kickstarter from people in AltSpace. Okay, but it's interesting to think about. So I'm just going to float this idea, and if anybody has a better idea, great. This is I want better ideas than I came up with. Okay, so imagine, because you can put a camera inside these things. So as it's flying, it can take a picture. I saw this picture taken by a CubeSat of the Himalayas. It was gorgeous. Okay, and I go, wow, that's a pretty nice looking picture. So you could imagine maybe having like little stick pins indicating where we are, just like with the globe. That globe that's turning that has little stick pins. Also, remember, I don't know if anybody's seen the Elon Musk sent up his Tesla, and there's an astronaut dummy mannequin sitting in it, and there's this picture of his car and with the Earth behind. Okay, well, you could imagine having a little LCD screen and a camera and what you could do is actually send up a picture or a logo, and it would snap a picture, and there would be your AltSpace avatar. Okay, on the LCD screen, and down below you got Earth, which is cool. And there's the overview effect. Okay, so people, there's this meet up about meditation, and it's like when you're off and you're standing and looking at the Earth, and it's a big globe, it sends you into a certain useful mental state. Okay, that's really complicated, really expensive. So let's go all the way down to the other end. Okay, what might we be able to get a bunch of AltSpacers to kick in a couple bucks a piece for? Okay, well, take a look at this. This CubeSat right here can carry up to about 2/3 of a pound. That's its payload. Okay, also, and so I actually calculated that you could fit. And now we're not talking about volume. Okay, because that would be a problem. Okay, but a human hair. Okay, how many human hairs do you think? How many human hairs on the average do you think it would take to make 2/3 of a pound? Like how many? If everybody donated one human hair and it's got their DNA, okay, and that all goes inside the satellite, and your DNA is now going to be, and like you look at your app and say, oh, my satellite that I'm a co-owner of, it's directly overhead, and there's a piece of me in it. Okay, I mean, would you pay $10 for that, $100 for that? I don't know, to get to be the first to do something cool like that. 500, about 500,000 hair, strands of hair. Now obviously you can't maybe fit that all into that space. But anyway, so I'm just throwing a bunch of stuff against the wall. Let's see if there's anything else I need to mention before I throw it open to ideas. Is this like the most ridiculous thing you ever heard, or wow? I also will mention one more thing. Over there where it says NASA CubeSat 101, and all of these are linked, by the way, on the event page, and even after the event page is still there, and that URL up there will get you to that event page if you want to read about it. And anyway, and they have got like this, like, okay, now that there's 1,000 CubeSats up there, they have like a kind of like a typical project plan. Like, what do you do first? Concept. And then a bunch of stuff, and then a bunch of stuff, and a bunch of stuff, and then operation, whatever it does, okay? And then, well, the last step is actually it burns up in the atmosphere. By the way, I do want to mention that. So I said to someone, and they said, oh, I don't want to put a bunch more space junk up there. Well, these CubeSats are intentionally launched at an orbit of about 190 to 250 miles, that they, and the speed, okay, that they eventually decay. Okay, and it could be a couple of months, or it could be 25 years, depending upon how high and the orbit. And okay, and that's because even when it's up in space, there are still a few molecules of air, and they slow you down over time. So eventually, this stuff, and it's at a level that it's not going to interfere with the major stuff. Okay, so it's like in the like aviation, where you're flying across country in different directions. Well, then you want to fly in different layers and stuff. So there's, so there is a kind of a best practices from like the United Nations or whoever's in charge of international space stuff. But I'll close on this. I'm just about to open up the conversation, and that is there's that chart that shows all these different things. It typically takes a couple of years. Okay, from concept to operation. Okay, and stuff is happening so fast. There's like 3 or 4 small satellite conferences just in the next 2 or 3 months, and they have got hundreds and hundreds of vendors and startups. I mean, and the stuff is getting smaller, cheaper. So at the end of 2 years, it could be like, this could be half that price. Okay, and so I think so. From my point of view, it's like, are there people interested in getting like studying this area, with an eye toward possibly doing this, and if so, above that little machine over there, I haven't decided how to get people. I know people use Slack and they use Discord a lot. I'm not a real fan of Discord. I don't find it that usable. But if Discord's the way to go, we could have a Discord channel, whatever. Okay, but yeah, one more thing above that. In fact, come over, follow me. Everybody, take a picture. Take a picture of that right there. Send email to chuckwebstermd@gmail.com to join mail list. Take photo of this to remember my email. I don't know the best way for people to collaborate. I mean, I'm on Twitter a lot. I've also, traditionally just emails, email threads. I'm willing to take suggestions, and now I'm going to force myself to shut up, and I will give you my famous 30-second rule. The 30 seconds is not that you only have 30 seconds to talk. You can talk longer than 30 seconds. Try to stay on topic and be polite and let other people, participate. But I will force myself to shut up for 30 seconds every once in a while. You'll see me just like go silent, and you'll see me go like this. And I'm counting 1, 2, 3, and sometimes people are shy, and we get up to 15 or 20, 21, and then you will feel the psychological pressure on the back of your head to blurt out something to keep the conversation going. Ask a question, make a suggestion, tell us about some research you read, or maybe you can contribute to an AltSpace VR satellite that you are co-owner of in a couple of years. So now I'm going to shut up.